Another 49 COVID-19 patients from the Minuangoda cluster.
මේ පොකුර වඩා අභියෝගාත්මක පොකුරක් අද වෙනකොට පාලනය කරලා තියෙනවා.
Catholic Bishops' Conference urges the government to draft a new constitution. National Christian Council expresses displeasure on several provisions in the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. Attorney General informs police to arrest Rishad Badiuddin. Cabinet grants approval to import basmati rice from Pakistan. Former Minister Mervyn Silva staged a fast.
Good evening and welcome to Primetime News on TV1. On to our lead story now. 145 individuals from the COVID-19 cluster in Minuangoda tested positive for the virus today. During a media briefing, Army Commander Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva and Police spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana expressed these views on the current situation surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic in the country.
All employees at the factory who were infected by the virus have been hospitalized. The others are at quarantine. The families of more than 85% of factory employees who tested positive for the virus have been subjected to quarantine. The second generation contacts of these patients have been identified as well. We have subjected them to self-quarantine until they are moved to a quarantine center.
Traveling
in areas that are under curfew will be restricted tomorrow and on Thursday as well. Accordingly, shops and pharmacies will be kept closed during this period. On Friday, we will arrive at a decision on reopening shops and pharmacies based on the situation during the next 2 days. The travel restrictions will not apply to candidates sitting for the advanced level examination.
Were COVID-19 patients detected from the head office of the Brandix company? It has been confirmed that 7 employees attached to the head officers of the Brandix company have been infected with COVID-19. Colombo Chief Medical Officer Ruan Vijayamuni said that the patients were identified after PCR tests were carried out on 147 employees. He added that these employees had visited the company's factory in Minuangoda recently and that the patients are not residents of Colombo. Several shops in Boralla were closed down today on suspicion of being visited by COVID-19 patient. The situation in areas that are under quarantine curfew. All shops in the Gampaha, Ganemulla, Kirindivala, Dumpe, Malwatahiripitiya, Meedigama, Nitambua, Pugoda, Veyangoda, Minuangoda, Veeragola, Valiveria, Pallevala, Yakala and Kadhaniya divisions in the Jayala and Kandana police jurisdictions, the Negombo division and the Sidua police jurisdiction remained closed today. Our correspondent reported that security had been tightened in areas that are under quarantine curfew. Certain fuel stations in these areas were kept open today. What is the situation in the areas surrounding Veyangoda? Travelling in 5 Grama Niladhari divisions in the Maligathanna and Kurikotua areas in the Veyangoda police jurisdiction was restricted this afternoon. 48 COVID-19 patients have been identified from the Meerigama area. The medical officer of health in Meerigama, Ruan Ranasinghe, has said that 136 families are undergoing quarantine.
We have identified more patients in areas such as Maligathanna, Mottunna, Kuriyakotua and Vanduramba. Therefore, we have imposed several restrictions in these areas to limit travelling. We have identified 21 patients from the areas in which we have imposed restrictions. Around 91 families have been subject to quarantine. We suspect that the cases may increase in the area.
What is the situation at the Katunayaka export processing zone? 34 employees of a garment factory at the Katunayaka export processing zone have been infected due to COVID-19. 375 PCR tests have been carried out in the Sidua area during the last few days alone. Among them, 102 individuals had tested positive for the virus.
We identified 34 patients at the garment factory last evening. Most of them are residing at boarding houses in the Sidua area. They have been hospitalized.
Have COVID-19 patients been reported from Anuradhapura? A 70-year-old woman had tested positive for the virus in the Vihara Mahadevachya area in Anuradhapura yesterday. Today it was confirmed that the 16-year-old granddaughter of the woman had also tested positive for COVID-19.
The daughter of an elderly woman is employed at the Brandix company. During the last 2 months, the granddaughter had resided with her mother at the lodging. About 1.5 weeks ago, the employee had dropped off her daughter at her mother's residence and returned to work.
Health authorities said that 11 individuals who had come into contact with the infected patients have been subjected to self-quarantine.
There is no need to fear the situation in the area. Both these patients have tested positive for the virus since the daughter is employed at the Brandix factory in Siduwa. Around 220 individuals have been subjected to quarantine in the Anuradhapura district alone.
What is the situation at the Dambulla Dedicated Economic Centre? Strict health measures have been imposed at the Dambulla Dedicated Economic Centre after 2 infected patients had visited about 80 stores recently. Our correspondent reported that restrictions have been imposed on the number of customers visiting these shops. What is the situation in the Mannar district? The Pettihutam and Periyakadai areas in the Mannar district that were declared as isolated areas were reopened for public activity from 6 p.m. yesterday. Accordingly, public buildings and shops were disinfected today with the intervention of the Mannar Urban Council. Is Colombo facing a risk of COVID-19?
We are in a position under which we can bring the situation under control. We cannot forget that the population in Colombo is high. Therefore, there is a high risk of contracting COVID-19 if patients are detected in Colombo. The epidemiology unit has recorded 160 cases from the Colombo district. If this figure increases, we might face difficulties in the future. We will systematically take steps to prevent cases from rising.
පූර්ව සූදානමකින් යුක්තව උපක්‍රමශීලී වෙලා රෝගීන් සංඛ්‍යාව වැඩි නොවන කටයුතු කිරීම වහවහා කළ යුතුයි.
What is the current situation of COVID-19 in the country? The spread of the virus has been limited to clusters. We experienced a similar situation previously as well. We were able to face those situations successfully. This is a challenging cluster. However, the situation has been brought under control to a certain extent. It will require at least 2 months to bring this situation under complete control. What is the reason for the detection of COVID-19 patients from various areas? We identified patients from areas that are located far from Gampaha. When considering the second and third generation of patients, their contacts might have traveled to areas away from Gampaha. However, identifying them doesn't mean that the virus has started spreading. It is only that they have been identified in those places. Are the facilities at hospitals sufficient to treat COVID-19 patients? We have sufficient hospitals to admit COVID-19 patients. Even if there is a surge in infections, there is no need to worry about that. We are continuing to identify and develop hospitals to treat these patients. At present, COVID-19 patients have been admitted to only 75% of the selected hospitals. If more patients are detected, we have sufficient beds to deal with this situation as well. We are kindly requesting the people to allow us to use certain hospitals in their areas if they are suitable to treat COVID-19 patients. In some rare cases, we have heard that the people have opposed such moves. Meanwhile, the GCE Advanced Level Examination, which commenced yesterday, continued for the second day today at 2,648 centres. The exam was held while giving prominence to health guidelines. Candidates who were scheduled to sit for examinations in other districts from the Gampaha district where the curfew is in effect also sat for the GCE Advanced Level Examination at 12 special examination centres today. Simply because the third cluster was formed in Sri Lanka, it does not mean that the clusters have been managed and that it will not be formed in the future. We have to admit less than 5% of the patients to intensive care units if required. Therefore, we have been allocated 146 ICU beds for existing patients. 14 hospitals have been allocated to treat COVID-19 patients. The virus spreads in close environments. Therefore, if there are more people in those environments, the risk of transmitting the virus is high. The infection rate would be high even if there is only one patient.
වෛරස් එක පැතිරෙන්න තියෙන හැකියාව වැඩි. එක් ආසාදිතෙක් හිටියත් අනිත් පැත්තට හැදෙන්න පුළුවන්.
The need to provide relief to people in several areas is reiterated in the political sphere today. When you go to the market to buy rice, there is no rice in the shops. There is no samba in the market. The price of coconut has exceeded 100 rupees. The cost of living has increased by more than 50% during the past year. The Gampaha district has fallen victim to COVID-19. This is the same district from which the ruling party received the highest number of votes during the presidential and general election. Now we question those who are in the Gampaha district. Is the government providing any relief to you? They are all under lockdown. The government has failed to manage the health crisis and the economic crisis in the country. We ask the government, is the 20th amendment the solution to all of these problems?
The ruling party says the country will not be placed under lockdown. When 2 or 3 individuals tested positive for the virus, they locked down the country because of the elections. More than 100 test positive for the virus now. Private sector employees have been instructed to apply for no pay leave and stay at home. The government has not been clear as to when the curfew restrictions will be lifted. They do not reveal any information about salaries or holidays. The government is planning on gazetting the 6-month imprisonment term for those who violate quarantine regulations. What about those who arrive from overseas? Will this law not apply to such individuals? Will this law apply to ministers and MPs? The government that came into power pledging one country, one law now has many laws. The government is worried that they might have to pay another 5,000 rupee allowance. This is why they are not going for another lockdown. After all, there is no upcoming election as well.
Laws are being regulated against individuals who fail to practice social distancing and wear face masks. Such laws will only be applicable to Sri Lankans and not foreign nationals. The Minister of Health clearly said that the high-level officials who arrive from overseas do not undergo quarantine. Why are there 2 laws in the country?
The legal framework in this regard has been drafted mainly focusing on the safety of health workers. We wanted to ensure the safety of every individual and did not want to inconvenience the public. We have heard of certain foreign delegations that have been chosen via the travel bubble concept. These delegations have undergone quarantine for a very long period and thereafter traveled to countries. These groups have had no contact with anyone and have given us an assurance that they are safe and healthy. Due to unavoidable circumstances, state officials have had to meet with such foreign representatives.
Curfew has been imposed in the Gampaha district for almost a week. This has inconvenienced the public. Did the cabinet propose any relief to the locals in this district? The police media spokesperson has instructed the locals to go to the supermarket only once, but to purchase products, people must have money.
The government has taken notice of the prevailing situation. During the previous COVID outbreak, the government provided relief amounting to 60 billion rupees to nearly 6 million families. We hope to bring the situation in these areas under control as soon as possible. The provision of financial relief to the public has not been discussed as yet. However, the government plans to provide some form of relief. The people in areas where curfew has been imposed have been deprived of earning any income for their livelihoods. The government must provide relief and support to those who have been severely inconvenienced. The government is yet to reach a decision in this regard. There is considerable amount of money accumulated in the COVID-19 fund. If the government is finding it hard to allocate public funds for relief, then arrangements should be made to make allocations from the COVID-19 fund.
During a debate about providing relief to those affected by COVID-19, a proposal presented by Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa in his capacity as a Minister of Finance to expedite development projects has been approved by the Cabinet. The proposal will ease the process of obtaining approval for development projects from various institutions and from the Cabinet of Ministers. A new system has also been introduced to make payments for contractors without a delay. Meanwhile, the Cabinet has also approved a proposal to bring all expressways under one entity headed by the Treasury Secretary.
පරිපාලන ක්‍රමවේදයන් ගණනාවක් තිබෙනවා.
There are several administration methods. One of the administrative methods is to manage it through an institution in which the government has a 100% stake. That way, the required steps could be taken without any hindrance.
හසු වෙනවා. ඒ නිසා තමයි
මේ ආයතනයේ මේ පිහිටුවීමේ නියමිත ආයතනයේ විගණනය වීමට නියමිතයිද මේ මහා මාර්ග සම්බන්ධයෙන් මුදල් සම්පාදනය කරගන්න
සෑම ආයතනයක්ම විගණනයට යන්නත්.
The 4th Magistrates Court today rejected a request made by the Criminal Investigations Department to issue warrants for the arrest of 3 people, including parliamentarian Rishad Badiuddin. 4th Magistrate Priyantali Enage said that based on the nature of the charges filed against them, the police do not need a warrant to arrest the suspects. Magistrate then ordered the CID to act accordingly and report facts to the court.
The Attorney General had directed the acting IGP to obtain a warrant from court and arrest MP Rishad Badiuddin. State Counsel Nishara Jairatna, the coordinating officer to the Attorney General, said the Attorney General had directed the acting IGP to obtain a warrant from court and arrest MP Rishad Badiuddin on charges of criminal misappropriation of public funds and violation of election laws with regard to the transportation of IDPs in CTP buses to vote at the 2019 presidential election. Meanwhile, Riyaj Badiuddin, the brother of former Minister Rishad Badiuddin, filed a writ petition in the Court of Appeal today seeking an injunction restraining the attempts to arrest him on political influences. He has also requested an interim injunction be issued preventing his arrest until the petition is heard. He was arrested on the 14th of April by the CID on suspicion of involvement in the April 21st attack and was being held on remand for nearly 5 months. Riyaj Badiuddin has told the court that although he was released after an extensive investigation revealed that he had nothing to do with the attacks, there is an attempt to re-arrest him for political reasons.
The Catholic Bishops' Conference has said that the government must not proceed with the 20th Amendment. Issuing a statement, it added that a new constitution needs to be the national priority at this moment.
The statement titled "The Mind of the Catholic Bishops' Conference in Sri Lanka on the 20th Amendment" was released today. The statement was issued under the signatories of the Bishop of Badulla, Reverend Dr. Winston Fernando, the President of the Catholic Bishops' Conference, and the Auxiliary Bishop of Colombo, Reverend Dr. Anthony Jaikodi, the Secretary General of the body. In its statement, the Catholic Bishops' Conference said that there is no rationale to put forward the proposed 20th Amendment. It added that the sovereignty of the people should always be safeguarded and protected regardless of whether it is an amendment or the drafting of a constitution. The statement recalled that all executive presidents appointed since 1994 had vowed to abolish the executive presidency with the powers vested in by the 1978 Constitution and to transfer power to the democratically elected parliament. The Catholic Bishops' Conference pointed out that this had not been done for reasons not unknown to the people. It emphasized that the concentration of power in an individual without checks and balances does not augur well for a democratic country. The statement stressed that a two-thirds majority in parliament based on political parties does not necessarily manifest the true conscience of the people. It called on the parliament to establish an independent constitutional council to draft a new constitution that ensures transparent democracy, the rule of law, and the equality of all citizens. The Catholic Bishops' Conference opined that the laws do not have to be changed due to certain individuals, but to identify suitable people who will safeguard the truth, justice, and the well-being of the country. It added that it is a duty of the democratically elected parliament to create wholesome governing structures that are capable of moving forward, and the drafters must plug the loopholes that lead to multiple interpretations in the constitution. The Catholic Bishops' Conference stated that greater clarity is needed if the constitution is to serve the public. The National Christian Council has requested the government to preserve the provisions in the 19th Amendment that promote the independence of key institutions and accountable governance. Issuing a statement, the Council said that all revisions that are to be made to the 20th Amendment should be made accessible to the public before the draft bill is put forward in Parliament. The Methodist Church of Sri Lanka, the Church of Ceylon, Church of South India, Sri Lanka Baptist Sangamaya, Presbytery of Lanka, Christian Reformed Church, the Salvation Army, Assemblies of God of Ceylon, and the Church of the Foursquare Gospel were among the signatories to the letter. The statement added that the 20th Amendment disregards the recommendations and the concerted campaigns that have been carried out since the implementation of the 1978 Constitution. It also noted that the introduction of a weak parliamentary council to replace the Constitutional Council, the abolition of the Audit Commission and the Procurement Commission, the moves to increase the powers of the President, and the reintroduction of provisions to allow the legislator to introduce urgent bills must be reconsidered. Meanwhile, convening a media briefing, the National Movement for a Just Society expressed their views on the 20th Amendment to the Constitution.
It is often said that the 19th Amendment to the Constitution makes it hard for the government to govern. Farmers are left without fertilizer for months. There are many problems in schools, in the health sector, also the environmental issues that were reported in the past few months. We would like to ask whether the 19th Amendment is to be blamed for all these issues. We don't think the 20th Amendment can solve these problems after centralizing all these powers to one person. The time has come for the people to look at the damage being done to the sovereignty of the people, to the independence of the people, and the damage being done to democracy in this country. And the time has come for intellectuals to pay their attention. We are telling the government we did not give the power to cancel the 19th Amendment and bring the 20th Amendment, but we gave you our mandate to bring in a new constitution. That is what needs to be done now. Now we can see that there is a huge crisis inside the government on the 20th Amendment to the Constitution, but we don't see the MPs expressing their views freely. I think it is because of the fear they have towards the President, knowing the fact that the President can suppress them. Because of this fear, they don't want to express their free view on the matter. But the Mahasangha has boldly come forward to show the arbitrariness of the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. Because of this bold move, I think we all can now come forward and speak out without fear. We never know what will happen to this country if we centralize all the powers to one person. Today we can see America, China, India, all of these states are silent on the 20th Amendment. None of these states are commenting on this amendment. They want to bring this state under one person and manipulate that person the way they want.
Meanwhile, the chief incumbent of the Ramana sect expressed his views on the joint statements issued by the chief registrars of the Sri Lanka Amarapura Ramana Samagri Mahasangha Sabha.
The Buddhist monks attached to the Ramanya sect must not get themselves involved in political activities. Monkhood and politics are two separate things. They must not be tangled with each other. Some individuals are saying that the chief incumbent has drawn his attention towards this and that he is aware of these matters. I do not wish to accept those claims. I am not a person who is willing to accept all that they say. I have reduced travelling these days since I become tired. Therefore, I am not aware of what took place yesterday. I must be informed of any meeting that concerns our sect. Otherwise, the incumbent priest on that day must be informed about it. The registrars must understand that it is not appropriate to issue statements without the knowledge of the chief incumbent.
Issuing a statement, Chairman of the Amarapura Sangha Sabha, Venerable Gantune Assajitero, said that the Council has not reached any decision regarding the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. The Venerable Thero points out that neither the Sangha Council the Venerable Thero represents, nor the Administrative Council or the Executive Sangha Council held any meeting to discuss the 20th Amendment. The Venerable Thero said that if the constitutional amendment is to be constructively criticized, each article of the amendment should first be studied.
President's Counsel Dr. Vijay Dasarajpaksa has said that the relationship between the public and politicians is not determined by dictators that are created through constitutional provisions. In a letter to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, parliamentarian Dr. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa pointed out that honesty and the trust placed on politicians is the deciding factor for their relationship with the people. The letter sent by the parliamentarian noted that the country has been laden with debt due to the loans that has been obtained inefficiently since 2005. Accordingly, Dr. Rajapaksa pointed out that the country's valuable resources have been acquired by China and that the country is losing its economic and security hubs as a result of this situation. He said that the US and Western forces are attempting to capture the country's security and economic hubs and that China and the United States have begun the tussle to make Sri Lanka the battleground for their war in the future. Dr. Rajapaksa warned that national security and the economy cannot be prevented from experiencing downfalls if internal divisions are created at such a time over matters such as the constitution. He pointed out that the hopes of the people are diminishing due to the moves to bring forth the 20th Amendment amidst stiff public opposition in the country. The parliamentarian said he had written to the president since statements had been made during a meeting at the Temple Trees on the 9th of October stating that there is no need to take up this matter up for discussion and that the amendment must be passed without allowing others to express their views about this matter. He requested the president to take steps to protect the country from foreign influence and also from becoming a failed state by obtaining the support of all parties instead of developing political tussles at a time when the country is facing multiple challenges. The parliamentarian opined that it is not practical to fulfill the objectives of the expert committee that has been appointed to prepare a new constitution to the country. Dr. Rajapaksa said that although there is no reason to obstruct experts from providing their opinion on the new constitution, it is a parliamentary select committee that must be tasked with preparing it if it cannot be done by the Justice Minister. This was how Dr. Rajapaksa had responded to the allegations made against the 19th Amendment, stating it had dragged the country backwards. The letter reads, and I quote, "If you and your elder brother, who is the Prime Minister, says the country has become degenerated during the previous administration, not due to the 19th Amendment, but due to the incompetence, immaturity and hypocrisy of the leaders in the previous government, then you have to understand how harmful the message is to the country and the government." End quote. Dr. Rajapaksa noted that lawmakers have understood the need for a new constitution that suits the country and resolves its problems. Accordingly, he requested the president to take steps to prepare a new constitution that is suitable to the country without any delay by taking into consideration the advice of all highly respected religious leaders, including the Mahasangha and His Eminence, the Cardinal.
මම දැක්කා විජේදාස රාජපක්ෂ මැතිතුමාගේ ප්‍රකාශයන් ගණනාවක්.
I came across many statements made by Vijayadasa Rajapaksa. A common feature I noticed in all those statements was hatred. I feel he made these statements as a result of not receiving a position that he expected to receive. For a politician who constantly shifted parties for personal benefit, I don't agree with this behavior where he has used the votes of the supporters of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna to obtain power and now change perspectives for his benefit. During the general election, electoral organizer of the Maharagama Urban Council was insisting that we let Vijayadasa Rajapaksa contest. We have made such sacrifices. Give leaders the strength through unity and discussions instead of pulling them backwards.
ඇදලා එහෙම යන්නේ නැතුව මේක සමගියෙන් සාකච්ඡා කරලා
පොදු ජන පෙරමුණ නිර්මාණය කරපු විදිය.
Some individuals did not witness how the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna was built at the grassroots. He was not part of that experience. However, the individuals who joined the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna once it began to record victories do not have the political right to comment on the political journey of the party.
නැහැයි කියන කාරණේ අපි අවධාරණය කරමු.
විදියට විජේදාස පක්ෂ මැතිතුමා අපි හිතුවේ
We expected Vijayadasa Rajapaksa to be at the forefront in supporting the efforts to bring forward the 20th Amendment. However, if he is acting in a contrary manner based on personal reasons, we wish to state that we are ready to act in a manner that does not harm the two-thirds mandate granted to the government and to protect the leadership and all those who paved the way for the formation of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna instead of standing with such individuals.
මොන විදියකත් හානියක් නොවෙන්නට කටයුතු කරන්නට
Cabinet approval has been granted to import 6,000 metric tons of basmati rice from Pakistan under the Pakistan-Sri Lanka trade agreement.
Although the private sector was allowed to import basmati rice under the bilateral agreement earlier, the permission granted to the private sector has now been revoked due to complaints that were received on various irregularities committed by importing rice of other varieties.
හැබැයි ඇයි මේ සාමාන්‍ය මිනිසුන් ගැන හිතන්නේ නැතුව බාස්පති සහල් ආනයනය කරන්න ගත්තේ?
සහල් සම්බන්ධව දීර්ඝ වශයෙන් සාකච්ඡා කරා. සහල් ප්‍රශ්නෙට පිළිතුරු සපයන්න.
This matter was comprehensively discussed by the cabinet. Decisions mainly focused on providing a solution that would solve the rice crisis in the country and protect the consumers. We have taken certain decisions in this regard and several programs will be implemented in the near future. We are only importing 6,000 metric tons with the objective of reducing the demand for other types of rice. Bandhana Gunawardana has been vested with the responsibility to comprehensively take action.
එතුමාටත් එතුමා සමග කටයුතු කරන විශේෂිත කණ්ඩායමකට ඒ වගකීම්.
Former Minister Mervyn Silva launched a fast this morning, wishing for the COVID-19 pandemic to be eradicated from the Gampaha district and the whole of Sri Lanka.
Former Minister Mervyn Silva, who arrived at the Sri Utpalavarna Sri Ranganatha Mahavishnu Devalaya in Dalugama Kalaniya, launched a fast after engaging in religious observances.
ඒ හමුදාපතිතුමත් මේ පිළිබඳව කිව්වා තමන්ගේ ආගමික ස්ථානවල යමක් කරන්න කියලා.
Even the army commander yesterday requested everyone to engage in religious observances. The health crisis has affected the locals of the Gampaha district, the people who voted for me and gave me 165,000 votes. This is not a political act. This fast is launched with the purest of intentions, wishing for this pandemic to be eradicated from the Gampaha district and the whole of Sri Lanka.
ඒක තුරන් වේවා කියලා අද මම වාඩි වෙනවා සත්‍යක්‍රියාවකට මට විශ්වාසයි මගේ විශ්වදේය ආමඳුරෝ මේ දිහා බලාගෙන මම වාඩි වෙනවා සත්‍යක්‍රියාවකට අද පටන් ගන්නවා අද හෙට අනිද්දා මගේ පූජාවෙන් ඉවර කරනවදෝ කියලා කල්පනාවකුත් තියෙනවා තාම ඉස්සර නැහැ.
Bimshani Jasing Arachi assumed duties as the first female Deputy Inspector General of Police today.
Bimsani Jasin Arachi has been promoted to the post of Deputy Inspector General of Police by the acting IGP recently. Accordingly, she will serve as the DIG in charge of the Welfare and Medical Service range. The appointment had been made upon a directive issued by the National Police Commission. DIG Bimsani Jasin Arachi assumed office at the Children and Women's Bureau in Colombo this morning.
And that's a wrap of this edition of Primetime News. For the Newsfirst team, I am Mazra Hassan with our sign language interpreter Taraka Gabriel. Thank you for joining us. Take care and good night.